Terrific. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for attending today's webinar. It's great to have you here. My name is Jame DiBiasio. I am based in Hong Kong. I'm on the board of the FinTech Association of Hong Kong, which has put this panel together to share our views about what are the opportunities for fintechs that are looking to scale into other markets and why they should be looking at Hong Kong. We will have for you two of the most prestigious and important financial institutions, not just in the city, but in the region, sharing their ideas with you. We're also going to hear from the head of our local FinTech office from InvestHK, government-linked agency that give you an overview of Hong Kong and the opportunities here, and not just here, but also in what we call the Greater Bay Area, which is an increasing closeness and integration with some of the leading cities in southern China, which is very exciting for financial services. Before we get going, I will also like just to have our partner members say hello and welcome their colleagues to today's session. And last but not least, we welcome your questions. You can ask anything that you want. Feel free to be as challenging as you can be in a polite fashion. And I believe this is a typical Zoom meeting room, so there's a chat there, and you can put a question there. Please don't use the chat for anything other than just the question, so we don't get too much clutter. So with that said, it's my pleasure. First, we're doing this in partnership with Tech Nation in the UK. I'd like to have Hussein El Syed just say a few words. Hussein?
Yeah, trying to unmute myself. Hi, everyone. So I'm representing Tech Nation today. I'm happy to be joining you from Cambridge for today's session, and thanks again for the FinTech Association of Hong Kong for hosting us today. You know, probably some of you know Tech Nation, the growth platform for UK tech. And as a brief background, we work with the UK government in Asia Pacific to support the Digital Trade Network, which is helping UK tech de-risk and accelerate their entry into these markets. I mean, I'm happy to tell you more about Tech Nation, but James, up to you if you want us to take more time to do that, or just quick introduction.
Quick introduction for now, but if somebody has a question, we can certainly put the mic back with you. And just to let members know, we are going to be working with our partners and friends in Europe to reciprocate this. So today we're learning about Hong Kong and the GBA and the opportunities for fintech, and then we'll be doing one later to help our fintechs get an idea about how to scale into your markets. So with that said, our other partnership today is with Portugal FinTech. So I'd like to welcome a member of their board, Antonio Ferral.
Yeah, hi, Jim. Welcome everyone, and thank you very much for this event. And I think it's really interesting to see our startups are also connecting with our geography. So we are a non-profit association. We are established in Lisbon. We manage basically the Portuguese-speaking ecosystem in terms of the fintech world, and we're really welcome to have this session. And we're also all really eager to do the other way around of presenting our opportunities here. But thank you, and thank you everyone from our community here. I can see some faces here.
Great. Okay. Well, you're welcome, Benvindo, and thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Great. So let's get into it then. We're all here to hear about what's going on in Hong Kong. Some of you may know the city very well. Some of you may have very little idea about it. To kick things off, I'm going to hand the floor over to King Leung. King is head of the FinTech for InvestHK, and I'll let him explain what that is, but he's a very visible and important figure in our ecosystem here. So King, over to you, and why don't you give us an introduction to FinTech in Hong Kong?
Thank you very much, James. As always, a kind introduction, and it's a great pleasure to meet with all of you and also share the floor with two great leaders from HSBC and AIA, which I'm looking forward to learn from the latest developments. Now, perhaps a good way to start this sharing, in a way to get the audience a bit of a background about Hong Kong fintech ecosystem, is that I like to start with the ecosystem. So first of all, we have over 600 fintech organizations. So this is something that we have done the survey to get an understanding of the distribution by the various subsectors of fintech. Now, as you can see, the pie chart is quite evenly distributed. So we have a little bit of everything. So obviously, as a international financial center, we do have a high demand for RegTech, because obviously we have a lot of financial institutions, like thousands of them in Hong Kong. So we lead the RegTech backup so that we are able to do things in a more automated, streamlined ways. And then, as you can see, the other bigger chunk of the pie, wealth tech at the sort of 11 o'clock angle, that accounts for 19%. So other bigger segments include, like InsurTech, digital assets, and then we have pretty much a little bit of everything. Now, and then on the right, you can see a little pie chart that shows that we have like 44% of the founders from overseas, and the other 56% from mainland China and Hong Kong. So we have a pretty nice international mix of founders in the Hong Kong ecosystem. Now, so with that, I think for those of you in fintech looking at opportunities, so obviously the first thing that comes to mind would be market sizing. So this is intended to give you a sense about the market sizing, particularly from a B2B perspective. So we have a good number of wealth management firms, 800 of them, many banks, 160 plus, insurance companies, 160 plus, 800 plus insurance brokers, securities firms, 700. So literally, if you just add them all up, we're talking about like thousands of financial institutions. On top of that, we got like a third of million SMEs. So in a way, this presents a pretty interesting and attractive market for particularly B2B fintechs. Now, and another thing that might be of interest to some of you is also what are the policy supports? And there are actually lots of them, but in the interest of time, I just picked one that is more prominent. So that is from our de facto central bank and also the banking regulator, HMA, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, in which they published the FinTech 2025 strategy, and in which they also laid out 5 different objectives. And first and foremost, and that would be the first line item on the right, all banks go FinTech. So what does that mean? That means that I think that we just joke around among the friends and colleagues in the banking space. This is like the regulator twisting the arm of the banks to do more in upgrading the various systems, to do more digital transformation and so forth. But actually, in a way, this is really a very good impetus for the whole ecosystem to look at digital adoption much more seriously. So this is in our ecosystem very important. Now, in a way, it's not just about sort of like one-way ask for the regulator asking the FIs to do things. We will also like, from a government standpoint, like to contribute our part as well. So one of the initiatives that we had was about this, what we call the FinTech proof of concept subsidy scheme, in which we are able to open it up to the whole ecosystem, in which the FinTech firm would need to find a commercial sponsor. Once they find a commercial sponsor, they do a POC at a cost which is a bit modest, roughly around, let's say, $13,000 US. And if the budget is around that amount or less, basically the government would cover the whole amounts, so that the FIs don't have to be burdened by the procurement process, in which we can all imagine how burdensome that can be. So this is intended to really fast track and accelerates the process of getting the FinTech solutions into like a POC arrangement with the FIs. And as you can see at the bottom of the page, we have a distribution of the different solutions being tested last year, the wealth tech, the RegTech, and so on. So again, pretty diverse representation. Now, we also have just numerous business matching programs, from the accelerators run by the governments to the commercial accelerators, incubation program, and so on. Now, so I don't want to bore you with the details, but it's fair to say that regardless of which time of the year that you come into the Hong Kong ecosystem, chances are there will be one program that's actively running to accept the application to basically help you to accelerate your market entry. Now, one of the programs is actually run by my team at Invest Hong Kong that we call the Global Fast Track Program. And just to give you a sense about the support we are able to get, again, it's really a great privilege. We are able to reach out to many leading FIs, including AIA and HSBC and many others. So these are the corporate champions that are very keen to explore the scene of fintech providers to, in a way, aid their own internal fintech adoption and digital transformation. So in some ways, these are the more open-minded potential buyers of fintech solutions. Now, at the same time, besides getting clients for the fintech companies, we also would like to do the connection with the investors so that we are able to spend the past 2 years in reaching out to different investors that specialize in fintech investment. So actually, for this year cohort, we are going to bring in another dozen or so fintech investors into this group. Now, if you think about the investment landscape, now, of course, there are different ways to look at it, the early stage, late stage, right? The VC fund, the seed money, the PE, growth capital, pre-IPOs. So this is one of the studies that we have commissioned PwC to help us pull together the numbers. So we look at the pie chart on the left. Actually, this represents the funding, private capital funding pool of the entire Asia Pacific. And actually, China being the big Goliath. But interestingly, a lot of people are not aware that actually Hong Kong sat at number 2 in terms of the private capital available for various investments. So that's why this is a really good place for the private side of investment. Of course, on the public side, our stock exchange has been ranked number 1 as an IPO destination for 7 out of the past 12 years. So this is another way to showcase that this is a good place in Hong Kong for fundraising. Now, again, not meant to overwhelm all of you, but I just want to say that my colleague who put this chart together, he took probably like 3 months to do this. Essentially, he went around to look at all the various subsidy schemes available through the Hong Kong governments, and he pulled together to highlight the ones that are relevant to fintech companies. And he summarized in this one pager. So it's fair to say that if you add up all these subsidies, assuming that the fintech firm is eligible to all of them, that amounts to, I think, something like more than 2.6 million US of subsidy/funding from the governments. So again, this is another way for us to demonstrate to the private sector that we are serious about promoting innovation, and more specifically fintech innovation. So with that, I think this is just my part. I think just kick things off and to give everyone an overview.
Well, one thing I just want to ask you, King, is also you talked about the number of firms we have here and so on. Give us a sense of the size of the capital market, and maybe give our audience a sense of how we fit in compared to the rest of Asia.
Okay. Now, I think that there are 2 things. When we talk about size, I talk about the overall market cap or amount of fundraising the past few years. So which aspect are you thinking about?
Well, like the market cap, the size of the equity and bond markets here, just a sense of just the sense of the scale that Hong Kong has in the region. Sure.
Well, now first of all, in terms of the fintech early stage investments, we have basically done the math and tracking. We're looking at so I think the last few years, we're looking at let's see, close to 2 billion in the past few years. So we just added up the past few years of funding. It amounts to 2 billion US. So this is sort of the early stage and also some of the mid stage investment. Now, when it comes to the capital market, and of course, a lot of people particularly from overseas, from the US, from Europe, they constantly asking questions. Okay, so what's the size of the capital market of Hong Kong versus say Singapore? And the number is the Hong Kong capital market is 10 times the size of Singapore. So it's like significantly larger in terms of liquidity.
Right. Okay. I think that's important. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's just important to give people a sense of when you're looking at financial centers, that there's there's definitely a tiering. With that, let me also, I was a bit remiss, I didn't really introduce myself properly either. The Hong Kong FinTech Association has been around for about 5 years. We're a large organization. Our membership is reflective of that breakdown that King had in terms of the diversity, big enterprises down to startups, and the people that support the ecosystem, consultants and lawyers and so on. And so we certainly, if you're going to be doing business here, we have a very active community. We have committees looking at all kinds of things: AI, big data, blockchain, insurtech, wealth tech, banking, and so on, and more. And so it's a great way to network with the industry, as well as to have a voice. We try to engage with our regulators in a proactive way. So so if you're interested, you can go to our website. It's you can just Google the FinTech Association of Hong Kong, but it's FTAHK.org. So we welcome you to visit our site. And just in my day job, this logo here, this is a media business that I run called DigFin, which covers who's doing what in FinTech in Asia. So you can check out DigFin Group if you want to get a media take. Now, let's get to the real action. Thank you so much, King. King is open to taking questions from you guys, of course. We welcome as many questions as you can put in the chat. But first, let me introduce our two enterprise speakers. Dan Roberts is from HSBC Commercial Bank. He is in charge of globally of its small and medium enterprise relationships. And within Asia, he's in charge of digital platforms and partnerships. So welcome, Dan.
Thanks, James. Hi.
And joining Dan is Mitul Lakhani. Mitul is with AIA. He's actually not with the insurance company itself in terms of doing insurance business, but he is with AIA Ventures, helping AIA with its digital strategy, its regional strategy, its partnerships, and whether that's investing or teaming up with fintechs here and around the region. So welcome, Mitul.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Jamie. Hey, everyone. Good to see you all.
So let's get into it. So we want to talk a little bit about just the way that, you're both very large in banking and insurance, respectively, very large players, very well established in Hong Kong and in Asia. How has been the track record in terms of your working with third-party fintechs? We often hear that, it can be quite difficult working with big enterprises. Your procurement and your POC process can sometimes outlast the cash runway of a fintech. Mitul, I see you're kind of chuckling there, so I guess I'm getting a little bit close to home. So why don't I pick on you first? Why don't you share the way that you're engaging with fintechs?
Thanks, James. Thanks for picking on me first. The chuckle was more because of actually being on the other side, in a leadership role at the FinTech, where we've had to work with banks and insurance companies. So I've been through some of that pain myself. But no, look, I think from an AIA perspective, I think we're very much at the learning stage in terms of, really figuring out how we can work with fintechs when it comes to speed, when it comes to efficiency, and when it comes to, what are the sort of the right areas to focus on. And I think, we started and embarked on this journey of really working with startups and digital and tech businesses probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And, what we've learned along the way is we probably at those early stages didn't have the necessary skills or the capabilities or even the technology, for that matter, to be able to work with these guys. And so we're using old school legacy tech stacks and trying to integrate with these fintechs. And this is where, to your point, the 12, 18 months integration timelines comes into play. And by that time, the fintech's like, look, we have other things to focus on. So look, I think we've invested in technology and we've partnered with tech partners that actually enable and facilitate our ability to work with fintechs. We've created specific teams within each of our most of our markets that allow us and come with a different mindset that again enables us to work with some of these fintechs and startups. I think the third piece is around processes, right? So in a couple of our markets, You know, we've actually gone through the process of looking at everything from how do we start the process of designing an insurance proposition, for example, all the way through to how long it takes to get regulatory approval, internal approval, getting the actuaries involved, and seeing and compressing and taking that from, say, 3 months to potentially, 3 weeks, as the case may be. So I think to summarize, a lot of time and effort's gone in really to build our own internal capabilities to make sure that, when we are working with tech startups, that we are ready to hit the ground running. We can integrate them with fast. We've got the right kind of processes, and we've got the right kind of people and skill sets to capitalize on those opportunities. But also, that in the near term and the medium term also benefits the businesses that we work with as well.
Okay, great. Well, it sounds like you guys are now open for business. Dan, tell us a little bit about what it's like to work with HSBC Commercial Bank.
Thanks, James, and thanks very much for having me on. Yeah, I mean, maybe to set the scene a little bit. So as you sort of introduced, HSBC is one of the world's largest financial services companies. It actually all started here in Hong Kong in 1865. And we're now, from a commercial banking point of view, we're the world's largest trade finance bank, we're the world's largest payments bank. We're in 50 markets, about 1.5 million customers. So you can imagine the sorts of interactions we have with fintechs can take all different forms. So maybe I'll just take you through a few of the different kind of types of relationship we'd have. So firstly, working with fintechs as kind of vendor solutions. So fintechs providing features or capabilities that fill a gap in what we're looking for, where we would work with those. And maybe I'll come back to that in a moment, but that's certainly a space where we've seen a significant increase in activity over the last few years. We've increasingly also started working with fintechs and with platform providers on a much more kind of collaborative basis. So we're looking more at banking as a service, where we're delivering our banking capabilities through other people's networks and distributions, and that's been a big sort of area of focus recently. And also there's more and more situations where we've worked with fintechs and tech providers to expose their solutions to our customer base, what we sometimes call beyond banking, but it's often adjacent capabilities where it's not something that we offer as a product, but it's something our customers are saying they would like to solve, and we're offering it. And again, we can maybe dive into that in a little bit more detail. Where we see strategic fit, we will consider taking an investment. So we've invested in about 30 businesses over recent years where there's a strategic investment, collaborative fit, and that's something we continue to expect to see. And also we're a bank, and so we're banker to lots of fintechs and providing solutions. Yeah, your sort of opening comments. So I think all large organizations have grappled with this question of how do we make the engagement better when there is just a massive scale disconnect between often the startup and large institutions. And as you say, things like procurement, commercials, security testing is obviously something that's immensely important to us alongside other financial services institutions, and not something we're likely to compromise on. So we want to make sure that things are really, really carefully security penetration tested. And so that has created friction. I'm not going to claim it's something we've completely solved, but it's something that as we've done more and more, we've certainly managed to streamline a lot of the procurement process. We've got partnership teams. I know, King, for example, you work with a number of different teams within HSBC who really focus on working with smaller partners. So we're sort of learning as we go on how to do it, and I think that's something we'll continue to see.
How big do fintechs need to be to partner with your respective organizations? Is there a certain minimum threshold in terms of their either their credentials, their size, or other factors? Mitul, you want to give us a sense of the most successful kind of relationships in terms of those sorts of metrics?
Yeah, look, so I think if you kind of split this up between sort of the B2Cs and the B2Bs. So on the B2C side, when we're typically working with these kind of businesses or startups, what we're looking for is, how do we work together with them to sort of co-create products and propositions, and then sort of distribute them through their platforms to their consumers. So for that specific, I guess, opportunity, then scale is obviously very important to us, within the sort of the markets that they have a presence in. And I think we're looking at, millions of customers, say, for example. When you talk about sort of the B2B players now, the B2B, I think is a little bit more diverse in terms of, how we look at it. It really comes down to what is the proposition and what is the partnership opportunity. So the way we look at B2B is twofold. One is, do they have any interesting products or services that could be interesting for us to offer to our customers? Mm-hmm. Do they have any solutions that help in terms of, the entire sort of insurance value chain, everything from marketing, data analytics, even how we do underwriting, how we manage risk and so on and so forth. And so that really depends on some of the things we're looking for in terms of those kind of businesses, how good then, how strong their solution is. Who are they already sort of servicing and the kind of clients they're kind of servicing. But also, it could be a solution that's so new to the market that we think it's a really interesting solution, and then we would run a much more sort of a pilot kind of program with them. So it really varies. So if they've got a lot of scale, then then we just are ready to roll out on a grander scale. If they don't, but the solution is really unique and really could potentially have an impact, and sort of that's our hypothesis, then we'll sort of run a more sort of smaller pilot programs to test and learn from.
Okay. And Dan, any differences for you guys?
Yeah, so we don't have any kind of hard and fast rules around it. Like Mitul, maybe I'd say, or maybe slightly differently, scalability is key. So scale, not necessarily on day one, but we've got to typically, see that the capability to really scale up and be a scalable proposition. I say, given our scale, if we can't find a solution partner who can deliver at scale, ultimately, then that's quite challenging for us, unless it's a very niche. We've done, but there are some examples. So, for example, more in the kind of R&D space. So we've got a number of partnerships with universities here in Hong Kong with HKUST. We've got a partnership with Tsinghua University in mainland China, and we've done some quite sort of technical work with spin out academic kind of very, very small startups in quite niche spaces. So we've been working on, some data security work with Tsinghua with a startup, which I think has like maybe 3 or 4 employees, but it's basically 4 like super bright PhDs who are doing the research, and it's kind of affiliated with the university, but it's spun out. We've got some, interesting work going on with things like lending fraud detection analytics, partly through the university, but again, partly sort of spun out. So there's a few sort of examples like that where they're very, very small, but they're playing a very sort of deep expertise in their particular field, and so we see the values. But generally we're looking for scalability to make sense for us.
In Europe, thank you, Dan. In Europe and in the UK, they have pretty tight regulations around data sharing, open banking, open API. It's mandatory, and in many cases, and there might even be some sort of regulatory run accreditation for third-party providers or something of the sort. So in Asia, we don't really have a regulatory-led regime. We have some basic rules here, but I think it's quite light compared to what you'd have in Europe or the UK. So maybe Dan, you could comment a little bit on, so is open banking something that is going to be, especially relevant to you?
Definitely. So I wouldn't say it's light, it's different the way it's regulated here. But there's clearly a lot of scrutiny around data privacy, data management from the regulators and obviously within the industry itself. So it's an open banking it's not being done in the same way as you say that it was done in the European Union or in the UK. But we're definitely seeing open banking in a number of markets across Asia, including in Hong Kong. China, mainland China, doesn't call it open banking, but actually has a very, very open banking environment with lots and lots of very different data environment, lots of data sharing. So it's incredibly important to us. I mean, I think one of the reasons we've embraced, as I said earlier, we're doing more around working with partners around distributing our products through them, or using third-party partners to make their products available to our customer base. And it's maybe not open banking, capital O, capital B as a regulatory thing, but it's definitely about the opening up of banking and using technical capabilities to provide a better service to our customers. So it's something we're spending a huge amount of time thinking about. I suspect we'll get onto GBA at some point. But it's also an area where we're working with fintechs, because there's lots of opportunities, but there's also some quite big challenges around things like data across the mainland Hong Kong boundary. The people who can solve for that, there's a huge opportunity, but there's some quite complex areas, and so we're working with people to sort of try and figure out, and working with the regulators to figure out how we can solve some of those problems, because if we can solve it, the opportunity is immense.
Before we get into GBA, one question from Mitul, more sort of a regional question. Asia is a lot more. The European Union, you can think of as a region. Obviously, the different markets have their different regulators and their different languages and so on. But there's also a pan-European regulator that in certain fields can be quite important, and therefore it creates a single market opportunity. In Asia, there's nothing like that. We every market here is completely different. Own regs, own market conditions, own customs, languages, etc. So when you're looking at opportunities for AIA, do you tend to look at them on sort of a market by market basis, or are you looking for fintechs that can help you scale an idea into very different environments?
I think that's a great question, James. To your point, I think it goes back to what Dan was saying as well, which I think is relevant for the data sharing arrangements and the data sharing rules in different markets, where they're all at a very, very different stage, not just from a regulatory perspective, but also in terms of how customers think about their data and how businesses think about their data. But to answer your specific question, I think what we look at is, and again, it depends on a case-by-case basis. If there is a fintech that's already got a proven track record and experience in multiple markets and has been able to navigate those regulatory environments, then it's obviously a path of least resistance for us, versus a fintech that just in one market, but hasn't really made any inroads in terms of addressing any regulatory needs that they may need to in sort of a second or third market. And that's purely from a speed to market perspective, and also taking comfort from the fact that they have the ability to traverse across multiple markets. We as a business are in 18 markets, right? So when we're looking at these kind of solutions, scalability, yes, but it's also how do they have the ability to cater to not just different types of customers in these different markets who have very different behaviors, but also how do they navigate the landscape, including the regulatory landscape as well.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And,
James, sorry, can I just give one example? Because one of the things King made talked about the Hong Kong FinTech 2025 strategy at the beginning, and one of the elements of that is around data infrastructure, which is, if you like, a little bit like open banking sort of data. So one of the initiatives that the Hong Kong Monetary Authority has been leading is an initiative called CDI, Commercial Data Interchange. I think it stands for, and it's a kind of regulatory vehicle that's supporting a lot of innovation around data and data exchange. And so there's a real opportunity, for data orientated fintechs, dialing in today. I think it's one of the really interesting spaces. So that we have, and I'm sure many other financial services providers are working on different kind of experiments or different initiatives under the auspices of the CDI banner, and there's some really interesting innovation coming. So it's not strictly speaking open banking, but it sort of achieves the same means. And say the data-driven fintechs, I would definitely encourage them to go and have a look at what CDI is all about and see some of the experiments, because there's real opportunity there.
Great, thank you for sharing that. So I want to then wrap up with you two gentlemen talking about the Greater Bay Area, or the GBA. Just a note to our audience, we welcome your questions. We'll make sure we save some time for them. Just put them in the chat and I will pick them up if you've got anything you want to ask Dan, Mitul, or King. So with that, GBA, Mitul, why don't you start with what's the vision, and of course then what will be the opportunity, and what are your needs in terms of how fintechs can help you realize what you want to achieve there?
So yeah, I think in terms of the overall GBA strategy for us, given that we have a business in China and we have a business in Hong Kong as well, is really looking at opportunities for either fintechs on either side of the border in terms of how they can help us achieve some of the things that we want to do in terms of a more integrated, I guess, insurance network and ecosystem. So that ranges from working with healthcare providers, working with distribution partners, and even working with potential fintechs as well, in terms of how we can develop products together and make them available to the wider Greater Bay Area.
Yeah, I should probably just preface this for people who aren't familiar. Hong Kong's population is like, say, maybe about 7.5 million people. But if you include the big cities of our neighboring province, Guangdong province, which is one of the largest and wealthiest provinces in China, along with Macau as well, and our friends in Portugal know Macau, you're looking at almost 90 million people. And there's a lot of integration work going on between the two. Insurance companies are already eyeing how can they set up some sort of service provision for people in the mainland. Because of COVID, we have not been able to receive people here directly to buy financial services. Previously, mainland people coming to Hong Kong, whether it's banking or insurance, were a major source of revenue and business for everyone. That's sort of been halted, but now we're looking at digital ways to be able to service the needs of people on the other side of the border, and that will hopefully go both ways. So just to give a background. So Dan, do you want to give us a sense from HSBC's point of view of what you're looking to do with this, what you're allowed to do, and how fintechs can help you?
Yeah, I mean, this is an immensely important part of our strategy, a very exciting sort of opportunity. And just to add to what you described about the GBA, so for the Europeans, just the proximity of these places is also really tight. So so Guangzhou is the large town that's kind of furthest away in the GBA. The distance between Hong Kong and Guangzhou in UK terms is like London to Swindon. In Portugal terms, Antonio and colleagues, I would guess it's about halfway between Lisbon and Porto. It's that kind of distance. And you're talking about if you imagine driving along the road between Hong Kong, which is 7 million people, and Guangzhou, which is say 12 million people, you've passed Shenzhen, which is 12 million people, Dongguan, which is 7 million people, Foshan, the 7 million people. So the proximity, it's like an enormous conurbation. So it's really important for us. We're the biggest bank in Hong Kong, and it's our home market. It was one of our two home markets with the UK. It's really, really important. We're actually the biggest international bank in China and in the GBA, the mainland side of the GBA. But frankly, we're quite small relative to the size of the population. So there's just a huge opportunity. As you say, it's one of the most dynamic parts of the world economy at the moment. Huge amount of technology investment, very, very vibrant market. And the scale is immense. I mean, we're doing, we're sort of, you talk about tech parks, and again, in European terms, often you think about, maybe a few hundred businesses. There are tech parks only 20 or 30 kilometers from here in Hong Kong, in Shenzhen, that have 10,000 businesses, and they're just incredibly activated businesses. So from our point of view, it's a banking opportunity. as things get more connected, as I said earlier, the way we deliver solutions has to change, and so we're definitely embracing fintechs to be solution providers, but also there's some very fast-growing, very successful tech startup businesses more broadly operating in this very dynamic space, and we want to be a provider of banking to them, as well as working with many of many of these firms as kind of solution creators or co-creators with us. Yes, it's a huge opportunity.
I think another point that we can raise around this integration story, even though it's not an instant thing, it's a slow progress, but the other examples of that connectivity that benefit Hong Kong is obviously we are home to trillions of dollars worth of Chinese millionaire, billionaire assets. So there's a huge wealth management story here. And as we're now just beginning to integrate the mutual funds and other and securities connectivity between mainland and Hong Kong bourses. And this is beginning to have some challenges here because mainland people are used to a very different ecosystem and mobile. They're more advanced on using phones for everything. And so I'd say we're in Hong Kong, we're playing catch up to an extent. But so I think there's probably a lot of need in some of those other areas as well. We've got still some more time. If anybody would like to ask a question, just please put it in the chat. Let's talk about some of the challenges of GBA, because it also does involve different regulators, cross-border issues around data, capital, people. So Mitul, can you just give us a sense of some of the challenges of GBA, realizing what that might mean, and again, how some of the digital solutions might come into play?
Yeah, I think you've covered the key ones there. One is obviously regulatory. The second one is around, which I think regulatory is the big one, right? So I think the fact that the regulators are part of this process, certainly makes a big difference. The second one is around the data sharing, which again, how do you have data going back and forth, especially if you're trying to provide solutions which are really relevant to different sort of customers. And the third is, really around, how do we work with different partners who have the ability to service or provide solutions for us for Hong Kong market as well as for the China market, right? And those solutions could be anything from some of the B2B players. So it's even things like payment solution providers. It's even anyone who can help us drive insights in terms of collecting more data and using those insights to understand the customers on both sides of the border better. So I think there's a whole bunch of different things that we're taking into consideration and looking at this point of time, James. So, but I think the key part is, getting the regulators comfortable and them being a key stakeholder. This whole thing has to facilitate it.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. And Dan, you want to add anything in terms of some of the challenges and how much of this is going to be a digital play versus a more traditional one?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's been covered already. Probably the other thing is so actually the Guangdong side of the GBA, so the mainland China side of the GBA, is probably the world's biggest provider of e-commerce supplier of merchant goods, for example, and China is still a regulated currency, so it's got capital controls, and that so there's also steps that have to be taken in order to convert currency as well, and lots of documentation that goes with that. And so there's a hugely dynamic market in terms of the export of goods from the GBA out. And demand for things like settlement, really strong data reconciliation, settlement of payments. So I think there's opportunity, but there's also challenges around finding the right way to solve some of these friction points that exist in a way that allows people to operate within the constraints of regulation, capital controls, and so forth.
Yeah. One last thing I want to ask you too is we didn't really talk about this, so I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but I think it might be interesting just to get your sense, because neither of you are born and bred here, obviously. just a sense of what it's like, the work culture in Hong Kong, if it's very similar to what you'd find in London, or if it's got its own pace, its own vibe. And maybe Mitul, you've only arrived recently, so you probably have a more visceral sense of what doing business here is like.
Thanks, James. Yeah, so just a little bit of background, I guess, to give some context to my answers. So I started off my career in London, which I think most of the people in this audience are pretty familiar in terms of the work-life, the culture there. Then went on to Malaysia and spent 10 years in Malaysia, which, very different sort of work culture there. And I think, coming back to Hong Kong, I think from my perspective, Hong Kong in terms of the culture here is probably a lot more closer to London. It's extremely vibrant. It's fast-paced. There's loads of opportunities. A lot of the large sort of Asian businesses are headquartered here in Hong Kong. And I think generally, in terms of sharing and knowledge sharing and meeting a whole bunch of people doing very interesting and very cool things, including in sort of the startup ecosystem. And even more so in the fintech ecosystem, I think it's really exciting. And then you have that huge amount of innovation that's been coming out of China over the years. So Hong Kong tends to benefit from some of that as well, and then continues to drive sort of the overall ecosystem. So yeah, look, I think Hong Kong to me is much closer to London than to Malaysia if I was to draw that comparison.
Okay. And Dan, I'm sure many people are familiar with HSBC in the UK, at least. If they're approaching you in Hong Kong, is it the same bank, or are there any local differences in terms of the way that business gets done?
Sort of yes and no. So yeah, it's the same bank, and we're all connected up. But I think obviously we try and customize the proposition, relevant for different markets. So you will see some differences. The regulatory, the technical environment is a bit different. So, but broadly speaking, you're going to get something very, very, very similar. The product suite is almost identical. Some small differences, but broadly the same. I mean, just to add to Mitul's point, I mean, my experience here is this is a city. Its history is all about trade and trading, and you just feel that kind of entrepreneurial vibrancy. It is very visceral, and it's a very solutions-orientated place. I would say more so than London, having spent most of my career working in London, although I have done stints in Europe and Africa as well. So I think that they're both very dynamic environments, but here I think it's got the edge in terms of that energy to solve and get things done. So it's a great place to do business.
Great, thank you. We've got a question in from Antonio. Thanks for the question. He's asking, because our ecosystem here is so large and you've got a constant influx of fintechs, I guess, knocking on your door, how do you manage dealing with startups, and any advice for a startup that wants to enter the market here? Who would like to take that one? I'll take volunteers.
I'm wondering if King should answer that one.
Well, I think they want to get a perspective from the enterprise. I mean, you're the one on the ground dealing with startups that are coming to you and saying, I'd like to do business with you. I've got a solution. I've got a technology. I've got a business here. How do you, are there any tricks that you can suggest to someone, particularly if they're coming from overseas, in terms of what's going to get your attention and how they stand out?
Yeah, I mean, so we come up, people approach us directly. We come across a lot of fintechs in sort of events and so forth. Internally, we operate a bit of a clearinghouse, so we'll try and there's a sort of smaller community of us who are, if you like, a bit more plugged into the questions and the scene. So we will quickly kind of sort things amongst ourselves. So somebody comes in to me to talk about a wealth tech proposition that isn't my bag. That's not my background or my area of speciality. So I will quickly connect it with the with the respective team on the wealth side. I'm trying to think the best advice in terms of how to get in. I mean, I think just like any business, it's just, you know, that first elevator pitch, just get across the business concept quickly, and show relevancy to the person you're pitching to. And I think both Mitul and I said, you know, because this is a big market, scalability is key. So do try and show that you've got a solution that will scale, because if scalability is a big concern, you're going to struggle to get you know, players like us to spend too much time on it, to be honest.
Okay. I think we've only got a few minutes left. If anyone's got a lot of last minute one you want to stick in the chat, we'll entertain it. I think I just want to make one basic point, is that what makes Hong Kong unique is not just the fact that it's big, but it's both part of the People's Republic of China. So we have a proximity and a closeness to what's going on in the world's second largest economy, and we also are, you know, a trusted venue for doing business with and on behalf of clients there. But at the same time, you know, as Mitul and Dan were describing, Hong Kong is very much plugged into the international capital market system. You know, we're all speaking in English here. Of course, there's other aspects of the business that might be more Chinese language, but essentially that there's scope here for international people to do their thing. So and then on top of that, the size and the diversity of the needs here, I think make this still a unique offering. And we have a vibrant fintech ecosystem here. We must have, I think, King, we must have at least 600 or so companies on your radar. So we are, you know, we're always open. And of course, the FinTech Association here is here to support people that are on the ground. So any last minute questions from the audience? If you don't want to stick a chat in, you can raise your hand or something. Otherwise, we will. Okay, great. Look, if you want to follow up, Mitul and Dan, Mitul first, how do people get in touch with you?
Good question. Maybe I'll just leave my email address on the chat, so people can just reach out to me directly if that's easier. Okay,
thank you. Dan?
Yeah, you can ping me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, so that's probably the easiest way to search me.
Great. King, if people want to get in touch with InvestHK, how do they find you?
Well, the same as Dan, find me on LinkedIn, and I'll connect you to our respective team members, because we have a dozen core team members serving the fintech community. And then, as you know, James, we are also connected to the broader ecosystem. So if we don't know the answer, chances are we know who has the answers. So we are able to connect you to the right person.
Great. And of course, the FinTech Association, you can check out our website. You can contact me. We've got a new chairperson coming on board in the next couple of weeks. So we're having some turnover here, but I'll be around, and I noticed there's a couple of my fellow board members on the conversation. So just feel free to contact me or go to our website, and there's a place there, and we welcome your questions, your queries, your hellos, and of course, if you've got any feedback about today's event, we'd also welcome that too. So you can either put it in the chat, or you can you can ask Antonio or Hussein to forward any comments or queries to us, and we'd be more than happy to get the right person in front of you. So with that, I think it's just for me to thank, first of all, our partners, Tech Nation and FinTech Portugal. Thank you for joining us and helping us arrange this today. And we look forward to having our members learn more about opportunities in your markets. I'd like to thank InvestHK, King Leung, Mitul Lakhani from AIA Ventures, Dan Roberts from HSBC Commercial Bank. And on behalf of the FinTech Association of Hong Kong, I'm Jame DiBiasio. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jame.
Thanks very much.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.